Sometimes the hardest season in life is not when God says no, but when he seems to say nothing at all. Silence can feel heavy, like heaven has shut its doors and left you waiting with questions. But silence does not mean absence, and delay does not mean denial. When God is silent, he is still speaking, just in a different way. He is moving behind the scenes, aligning what you cannot see, preparing what you cannot handle yet, and shaping you for something greater than you imagined. There are moments in life when the waiting feels unbearable, when you are certain that the answer should have arrived by now, and yet all you hear is silence. You look at the clock, you measure the years, and you wonder why heaven seems slow. But what if the delay is not denial? What if the delay is not neglect? What if the delay is protection? God knows the future you cannot see, the traps that have been set in places you have not walked yet, and the dangers that are waiting behind doors you are desperate to open. His silence and delay may feel like a burden, but in reality, it is a shield keeping you from stepping into something that would destroy you. When you study the stories of Scripture, you will see that delays were often God's way of protecting his people from rushing into something prematurely. Joseph's dreams were delayed, but that delay protected him from stepping into leadership before his character was tested. Israel's journey to the promised land was delayed, but that delay kept them from walking unprepared into battles they were not ready to fight. Sometimes God holds you back, not because he doesn't love you, but because he loves you too much to let you walk unprepared into a fight that could crush you. We think delay means God has forgotten, but often delay means he is actively working to protect what he has promised. Imagine a parent who holds their child back from crossing the street, even though the light is green, because they see the car speeding from the corner. To the child, it feels unfair. To the parent, it is safety. God is that kind of father. His delays are full of vision, and his timing is laced with protection. Delays expose the places in our hearts where impatience lives. They confront our desire to control outcomes, to move at our pace, to force doors open. But those delays also break us of self-reliance and teach us that God's wisdom far outweighs our own. The very thing you are fighting against, the silence, the stillness, the waiting, might be the very thing that is saving your future. Sometimes the delay is not about keeping you from harm, but keeping you from lesser things. You may be asking God to open one door while he's preparing to give you a much bigger one. If he lets you run into that smaller opportunity, you might settle for it and miss the greater blessing waiting down the road. His silence protects you from your own short-sightedness. Think of how many times you have prayed for something you thought you needed, only to look back later and thank God he didn't give it to you. That relationship you thought was perfect, that job you thought was the dream, that plan you thought was foolproof. If you had received it, it would have ended in pain, disappointment, or destruction. His delays become testimonies of his faithfulness when time reveals the danger he shielded you from. There is also protection in preparation. God knows that stepping into certain opportunities requires maturity, endurance, and wisdom that you don't yet carry. His delay is giving you space to grow into the person who can handle what he is about to give. If he answered too quickly, you would collapse under the very blessing you prayed for. His delay is not punishment. It is training ground. Delays also protect your witness. If God allowed you to rise too fast, Without the roots of character being deepened, your influence could fall just as quickly as it rose. His silence protects the integrity of your testimony, because when you finally step into the moment, it will not be your talent that sustains you, but your character. And character takes time to be formed in the silence of waiting. The truth is, the silence of delay often reveals who or what we really trust. When God seems still, do we lean into his promises or do we chase after counterfeits? When he doesn't move at our pace, do we take matters into our own hands like Abraham and Sarah did with Hagar? Or do we rest in the knowledge that his ways are higher than ours? His delays protect us from decisions that are birthed out of impatience and flesh rather than faith and obedience. So, when you feel delayed, when heaven is silent, remember that protection often comes wrapped in waiting. What feels like unanswered prayer may in fact be God's most profound answer. The kind that shields your future, preserves your destiny, and keeps you from the very thing that would have destroyed you had he given it too soon. There are seasons in life when weakness overwhelms you, when it feels like the weight of the world is pressing on your shoulders and all your natural strength is drained. You try to push forward, but your body is tired, your mind is weary, and your spirit feels crushed. Yet it is in that very place of weakness where God does his greatest work. His power is not revealed in the moments you feel strong, confident, and capable. It is revealed in the moments when you have nothing left to lean on but him. Weakness becomes the very soil where divine strength grows. When the Apostle Paul cried out about the thorn in his flesh, he didn't receive the answer he wanted. God didn't remove the thorn. Instead, he said, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." This shows that the presence of weakness is not the absence of God, but rather the opportunity for his strength to shine. The very thing that makes you feel inadequate is the platform where God's strength steps in and does what you could never do on your own. In weakness, pride is stripped away. When you feel strong, it's easy to think you don't need God's help, to rely on your own talent, your own wisdom, your own strategy. But when weakness settles in, when you've exhausted every plan, when your efforts prove insufficient, you are forced to lift your eyes to the one who has no limits. That dependence shifts the burden from your shoulders to his, and in that exchange, you find a strength that does not run dry. Weakness also reveals the authenticity of faith. Anyone can declare trust in God when life is smooth, but true faith is tested in the furnace of trials, pain, and insufficiency. It is when you are too weak to climb the mountain that faith tells you he can move it. It is when you are too weary to fight that faith tells you he can win the battle. Weakness doesn't disqualify you. It actually qualifies you to experience the supernatural. There is also a hidden beauty in weakness because it forces you to slow down, to pause, and to recognize the presence of God in ways you might have overlooked in seasons of strength. It is in the quiet moments of brokenness that you hear his whispers more clearly. It is in the place of emptiness that his spirit fills you more fully. What feels like loss in your weakness is actually gain because you encounter God at depths you would have never known otherwise. Strength in weakness is not about God making you a little bit stronger so you can keep going. It is about him being your strength entirely. The world says, dig deeper, push harder, fight longer. But God says, rest in me, for I will fight for you. His strength doesn't simply boost yours. It replaces it. He doesn't just help you carry the load. He carries you. That is the mystery and the miracle of divine strength rising in human frailty. Weakness also teaches humility. It reminds us that we are not invincible, that no matter how much knowledge we gain, no matter how much success we achieve, we are still dependent on the one who holds breath in our lungs. Weakness breaks the illusion of self-sufficiency and keeps us grounded in the reality that apart from him, we can do nothing. And in humility, we find ourselves closer to God because he gives grace to the humble, but resists the proud. Sometimes weakness isn't about a personal flaw or failure, but about being placed in situations that are bigger than you on purpose. God may position you in circumstances that feel overwhelming, so you will learn to see his hand at work. David facing Goliath was not about David's strength, but about God's. Gideon leading an army of 300 against thousands was not about Gideon's might, but about God's. Your weakness becomes the canvas for his glory to be painted on display. Weakness also trains endurance. When you feel weak but choose to keep trusting, to keep believing, to keep moving forward by faith, your spiritual muscles grow stronger. Just like resistance builds physical strength, the resistance of weakness builds spiritual resilience. Over time, you learn that the moments that seemed to break you were actually the moments that built you into someone unshakable. So, every time you encounter weakness, do not despise it, for it is in that place where your natural strength ends that divine strength begins. It is in that place where your inability meets his unlimited ability, and where the impossible becomes possible through the God who delights in showing his strength through vessels that know they are weak. There are moments in life when doors you prayed for, worked for, and hoped would open suddenly slam shut. And in the natural, it feels like rejection. You think you are qualified. You believe the timing is right. You may even see no reason why it shouldn't work, and yet the door will not budge. It is in those moments that you must understand that God's hand is often at work in ways you cannot yet perceive. What appears to be rejection in your eyes may actually be redirection from his perspective. Closed doors are not always punishment. Many times they are protection. When a door closes, frustration often follows. You may feel stuck, confused, or even angry, questioning why God would block something that seemed good. But that closed door may be saving you from entering a path that looks bright now, but leads to darkness later. There are opportunities that appear promising on the outside, but would have drained your spirit, compromised your values, or derailed your destiny if you walked through them. The God who sees the end from the beginning knows what you do not know, and he closes doors not to deny you, but to guide you toward his perfect will. Closed doors also have a way of sharpening your discernment. When you try to force something open and it won't move, it awakens you to the reality that not every good thing is a God thing. A promotion, a relationship, a partnership, or a plan may all seem appealing, but if the Spirit of God is not in it, it will not bear lasting fruit. A door closing makes you pause long enough to ask the right questions, seek God's wisdom, and align your steps with his direction rather than being swept away by your own desires. Sometimes doors close because your assignment in a place has ended. You may have been comfortable there. You may have found success there. But God knows when your season is up. Holding on to what is familiar can keep you from stepping into the new thing he has prepared. Just as the children of Israel could not stay in Egypt forever, you cannot stay in a place God is calling you out of. A closed door becomes the force that pushes you forward when comfort would have kept you stagnant. Other times, a closed door is not permanent, but simply a delay. Timing in God's kingdom is just as important as direction. You may be ready in your mind, but God knows your character still needs refining, or certain pieces of the puzzle have not yet aligned. If He were to open the door too soon, the blessing would become a burden, and the opportunity would crush you instead of propel you. So He shuts the door for now to prepare you for the fullness of what is to come. Closed doors also expose where your trust truly lies. When things go according to your plan, it's easy to feel secure. But when a door is slammed shut, you must choose whether you will lean on your own understanding or trust in the Lord with all your heart. It is in these seasons of redirection that faith is tested. Do you believe He is still guiding you even when you don't see the way? Do you believe His no is just as purposeful as His yes? Closed doors are not meant to destroy faith, but to deepen it. There is also a divine wisdom in how God orchestrates redirection. He not only closes doors to protect you from wrong paths, but He simultaneously sets the stage for new ones to open. Often, it is not until you've walked away from a closed opportunity that the true path becomes visible. Like a shepherd leading sheep, God redirects you away from danger, not to leave you wandering, but to guide you into green pastures you could not have found on your own. In some cases, closed doors are the very catalysts for growth. If every opportunity worked out easily, you would never develop perseverance, creativity, or resilience. Closed doors force you to think differently, to pray more fervently, and to depend on God's guidance at a deeper level. They stretch you beyond your comfort zone, and in that stretching, you become stronger, wiser, and more spiritually mature. Closed doors also remind you that your journey is not just about what you want, but about what God wants to do through you. He is weaving a bigger story, one that involves His kingdom and His glory. The opportunities He blocks are often tied to purposes beyond your sight. You may not understand in the moment, but years later you look back and realize that if He had opened that door, you would have missed the path that shaped you, blessed others, and glorified His name. So when doors close, do not assume you are abandoned or forgotten. Every closed door carries with it the fingerprint of divine wisdom. Each one redirects you from paths that would have harmed you, slowed you down, or robbed you of greater purpose. Closed doors are not the end of your story. They are the turning points God uses to reroute you toward the place He has already prepared for your destiny to unfold. There are times when life falls apart, when storms rage so violently around you that peace should be impossible. Bills stack up higher than your paycheck. Relationships strain under pressure. Sickness knocks on your door, and uncertainty clouds your future. Yet in the middle of it all, you find yourself strangely calm, steady, and unshaken. That kind of peace doesn't come from circumstances. It comes from God. It's a peace that surpasses human logic, a calmness that cannot be explained by what's happening around you. It's not the absence of trouble. It's the presence of God's hand holding you in the trouble. This peace is unexplainable to the world because it does not match the situation. People expect panic when things fall apart. They expect tears, anger, and breakdowns. But when you walk with God, He plants a stillness in your soul that confuses even those who know you best. They see your storm, but they also see your smile. They watch the battle you're facing, but they hear your voice still praising. That is the kind of peace that makes people ask questions. Questions that lead them to the God who holds you together. Such peace cannot be manufactured by positive thinking or motivational words alone. It is birthed from the deep assurance that God is sovereign, that He sees what you cannot see, and that His promises stand even when everything else is shaking. You know He will never leave you nor forsake you, so even when the storm refuses to quiet down, you can rest in the One who commands the winds and the waves. This peace flows from trust, and trust grows stronger every time you release control and lean on Him. It is in the moments of chaos that this peace proves its power. Anybody can be calm when everything is going well. But when your world is falling apart and yet your soul is anchored, that is when you realize this peace is supernatural. It doesn't depend on external conditions. It is not fragile, not temporary, not tied to whether life is easy or hard. It is rooted in something eternal, immovable, and unshakable. It is rooted in God Himself. This kind of peace also acts as a shield. It guards your heart and mind from being consumed by fear and worry. Worry is a thief. It robs your sleep, drains your strength, and clouds your judgment. But when God's peace fills you, worry loses its grip. Fear tries to rise, but peace silences it. Anxiety tries to creep in, but peace blocks its entry. It is as if your spirit is surrounded by a wall that no chaos can penetrate. The peace of God also brings clarity. When your heart is restless, decisions become clouded and emotions drive your choices. But when peace settles in, your vision clears. You stop making choices out of desperation and start making them from a place of trust. You stop reacting out of fear and start responding with wisdom. Peace allows you to hear God's whisper, even in the loudest storm, guiding you step by step when you don't know what to do. Peace that doesn't make sense also testifies to others that God is real. People can argue with your theology, they can debate your beliefs, but they cannot deny the peace they see in you. When they watch you walk through valleys and still carry joy, when they see you lose what others think is everything and still keep hope, they realize you have something this world cannot offer. Your peace becomes your witness, pointing them toward the Prince of Peace who makes it possible. Another powerful thing about this peace is that it is not easily shaken by news headlines, rumors of wars, or the chaos in society. While the world panics at every crisis, you rest in the assurance that God is still in control. This peace allows you to live without fear of tomorrow, without dread of what might happen, because you know who holds tomorrow. You are not blind to reality, but you are anchored in a greater reality, the sovereignty of God. This peace also heals the inner battles that rage within. Sometimes the storm is not outside of you, but inside your own mind. Fears, doubts, insecurities, regrets, and shame. The peace of God silences those inner voices and reminds you that you are loved, forgiven, and held by Him. It restores balance to your soul, calming the war within so you can stand firm in every battle without. Lastly, this peace that doesn't make sense teaches you dependence. The more you experience it, the more you realize it cannot be earned, bought, or created. It must be received. It drives you deeper into prayer, deeper into trust, deeper into surrender. And as you live in that place of dependence, you begin to walk in a steadiness that is not swayed by the ups and downs of life. You learn that peace is not found in everything going right. It is found in resting in the one who is always right there with you. When God is silent, it is often because he is working on something deeper than what you can see. Silence is not absence. It is preparation. And in that preparation, God is refining your character. Just as gold must go through fire to be purified, so must your heart, your motives, and your desires go through trials to be strengthened. The process of refinement is rarely comfortable, but it is always purposeful. Silence forces you to confront yourself, to face areas in your life that might remain hidden when everything is loud and busy. Refinement of character happens in the unseen places, in the waiting seasons, and in the quiet struggles that no one else notices. It is in those times that God exposes impatience, pride, or fear that you didn't realize were controlling you. He strips away the false securities you've leaned on, the approval you've chased, and the shortcuts you've been tempted to take. His silence is often his scalpel, cutting away what doesn't belong, so that you can reflect more of him. There is a difference between God blessing your life and God shaping your life. Blessings often bring joy, but shaping often brings discomfort. When God is refining you, he allows situations that test your faith, not to break you, but to strengthen your endurance. He allows delays, not because he is punishing you, but because he is teaching you how to wait with patience and faith. Every test of character is an opportunity to either grow or to resist, and his silence is the classroom where those lessons unfold. Refinement also develops humility. When you don't have quick answers and the silence lingers, you realize how dependent you really are on God. You realize you cannot fix everything, cannot control everyone, cannot predict every outcome. And in that place of humility, pride dies and surrender grows. Humility is the soil where God's grace thrives, and his silence is often the tool he uses to till that soil. Another aspect of refinement is perseverance. In silence, you learn to keep walking even when you don't hear applause. You learn to pray even when you don't see instant results. You learn to obey, even when you don't feel like it. Perseverance is not built in moments of comfort. It is forged in the fire of difficulty. When God seems quiet and you still choose to trust him, that is where perseverance takes root. And that is what prepares you for greater assignments. Refinement also reshapes your priorities. In silence, you begin to notice what truly matters and what doesn't. You learn that titles, applause, and possessions don't satisfy your soul. You discover that intimacy with God is worth more than anything else. You learn to let go of distractions and idols, and you start to focus on the eternal rather than the temporary. Silence has a way of clarifying vision and shifting desires toward what aligns with God's heart. In the process of refinement, your faith matures. Childlike faith is beautiful, but tested faith is unshakable. When silence stretches your patience, it forces you to anchor your faith, not in feelings, but in truth. You stop depending on the emotional highs of answered prayers and start trusting in the unchanging character of God. Maturity is knowing that God is good even when life doesn't feel good, and that truth becomes your foundation in the silent seasons. Refinement also reveals hidden strength. You often don't realize how much endurance, resilience, and courage God has placed in you until silence forces you to dig deeper. When answers don't come quickly, you discover wells of strength you didn't know existed. You find out that you can stand, that you can endure, that you can trust even when you don't understand. Silence uncovers the spiritual muscles that comfort never activates. This refining work is not just for your benefit, it is also for your witness. When people see you remain faithful, patient, and hopeful even when God seems silent, they see evidence of His work in your life. Your refined character becomes a testimony louder than words. It shows others that faith is not just about blessings. It is about transformation. It is about becoming more like Christ in the furnace of silence. Ultimately, refinement through silence prepares you for what lies ahead. God cannot entrust heavy assignments to fragile character. He uses silence to strengthen the core of who you are so that when doors open, when opportunities arrive, and when battles intensify, you will not crumble. You will stand steady, not because life was easy, but because silence taught you endurance, humility, faith, and focus. What feels like delay is often divine development, shaping you into the person God needs you to be for the future He has already written. Sometimes God's silence is not because He has abandoned you, but because He has already positioned help around you in ways you cannot immediately recognize. In moments of struggle or waiting, when you feel forgotten, God often works through people. Friends, mentors, strangers, or even unexpected voices, to carry encouragement, provision, or direction. His silence pushes you to look beyond your own ability and notice how He orchestrates circumstances through the hands and hearts of others. Help arriving through people is one of the most overlooked signs of God's silent involvement. It may not look supernatural at first. It might be a friend who checks on you just when you're about to give up, a co-worker who offers advice that shifts your perspective, or a stranger whose kindness restores your hope in humanity. God often uses human vessels to deliver divine answers, and because He works quietly, you may only recognize it later, that it was His hand moving through them. When you are in a season of silence, pride can tempt you to isolate yourself or reject the help of others. But part of the lesson is learning humility by receiving. Sometimes God allows the silence to remain until you stop striving to fix everything on your own and open your heart to the resources He sends through people. Accepting help doesn't mean weakness. It means you are acknowledging that God works in community and often answers prayers in unexpected packages. Hidden help often comes disguised. You may be praying for financial provision, and God sends an opportunity instead of a direct gift. You may ask for guidance, and He sends someone who challenges your thinking rather than simply agreeing with you. You may pray for comfort, and He sends someone who doesn't have eloquent words, but simply sits with you in your pain. These seemingly ordinary moments are God's silent strategies, equipping you and carrying you through the waiting season. Another aspect of hidden help is divine connection. Some people step into your life only for a season, and you may not fully understand their purpose until later. God aligns certain encounters at the right moment to protect you from a wrong decision, to open a door you couldn't open yourself, or to affirm something He has already placed in your heart. These connections are not random coincidences. They are orchestrated reminders that you are not navigating silence alone. God's silent help through people also stretches your trust. You may hesitate, wondering if someone's assistance is really from Him, but over time, you see how every piece falls into place. His silence forces you to depend on discernment, prayer, and patience as you receive what others bring into your life. And as you recognize his fingerprints on these interactions, your faith deepens because you see how even in silence, he has been actively guiding your steps through the people he places along your path. Many times, hidden help doesn't just support you, but also shapes you. God uses people to refine your character, sharpen your wisdom, and remind you of your worth. That mentor who speaks hard truths, that friend who refuses to let you quit, that stranger who offers compassion, each one plays a role in shaping you for what God is preparing. In the silence, you are being molded not only by what God is withholding, but also by what he is sending quietly through human vessels. Sometimes the help you need is not material, but emotional or spiritual. God sends people who carry burdens with you, who intercede for you in prayer, or who simply remind you of his promises. You may never know how many prayers have been lifted on your behalf, how many tears have been shed for your breakthrough, or how many people God stirred to stand with you in unseen ways. His silence is never inactivity. It is often an invisible network of support operating around you. This hidden help also teaches gratitude. When you pause to reflect, you realize how many times God sustained you through the kindness of others. Gratitude opens your eyes to see his silent hand at work in the smiles, words, and actions of people he placed strategically in your path. What you once thought was random kindness, you begin to recognize as divinely arranged provision. Gratitude then becomes fuel for faith, reminding you that silence does not equal absence. Through hidden help, God reminds you that he does not design life to be lived in isolation. His silence pushes you to lean into community, to value relationships, and to recognize his image in the people around you. The encouragement you receive in the silent seasons often becomes the same encouragement you give, others walk through theirs. In this way, hidden help is not only God sustaining you, but also God preparing you to become the answer to someone else's prayer when they face their own season of silence. When God is silent, it is often because he is preparing to reveal something greater than what you currently understand. Silence is not always a punishment. It can be a pause before a deeper unveiling of his will, his character, and his purpose for your life. In those moments when you cannot hear his voice, he is aligning events, shaping your heart, and arranging the right timing so that when the revelation comes, you are ready to receive it with clarity and conviction. A greater revelation waiting often means God is pulling you away from surface level answers. You may want quick fixes, immediate guidance, or instant relief, but God knows that shallow answers won't build lasting faith. His silence forces you to press in, to seek him more earnestly, and to rely less on your own understanding. This waiting season becomes the soil where patience grows, trust deepens, and spiritual hunger increases, making you capable of grasping the greater revelation he intends to release. Sometimes silence comes because God is protecting you from information you are not mature enough to handle. If he showed you the full picture too soon, it might overwhelm you or tempt you to move in your own strength rather than his. The waiting period refines your perspective and builds the endurance necessary to carry the weight of what he is preparing to show you. When the revelation finally comes, you realize it was worth the wait because it meets you at the exact point of maturity you needed. The greater revelation often involves seeing God himself in a deeper way. It is not always about answers to specific prayers, but about understanding his heart on a higher level. His silence strips away distractions, forcing you to seek him rather than just his blessings. When he finally reveals himself more clearly, you discover that the silence was a sacred invitation to intimacy, where the focus shifts from what you wanted to who he is. In Scripture, many who encountered God's silence later received extraordinary revelations. Job, after seasons of silence and suffering, encountered God in a whirlwind and gained a greater vision of his sovereignty. Paul, after pleading with God to remove his thorn, received the revelation that God's grace was sufficient in weakness. These examples show that silence is often the womb of revelation, where the unseen work of God prepares you for truths you could not otherwise comprehend. God's silence also positions you to appreciate the revelation when it comes. If he always answered immediately, you might take his voice for granted or fail to value the depth of his truth. But when you have wrestled in silence, sought him in prayer, and endured seasons of uncertainty, the moment of revelation becomes a life-altering encounter. The greater the weight, the more powerful the unveiling, because your heart has been conditioned to treasure the answer. A greater revelation waiting often connects to your calling and destiny. God is not just answering your temporary concerns. He is revealing long-term assignments, spiritual growth, and eternal perspectives. What feels like silence today may later prove to be the foundation of a testimony that impacts not only your life, but also those connected to you. His silence creates anticipation, and his revelation carries weight that shapes generations. The greater revelation is also about perspective. God may be silent because he wants to open your eyes to see life from a heavenly angle rather than a human one. When the revelation comes, it reframes your struggles, showing you how pain, loss, and delays were all stepping stones toward his greater purpose. You begin to see that what you thought was God ignoring you was actually God preparing you to see beyond the temporary into the eternal. There is also a testing element in the silence that precedes greater revelation. God allows the silence to test your faithfulness, to see if you will still seek him when you cannot feel him, and to reveal whether your devotion is based on convenience or commitment. When you endure the silence, you prove your faith, and when the revelation comes, it confirms that your trust was never wasted. The silence becomes proof that you valued the giver more than the gifts. Ultimately, a greater revelation waiting is God's way of reminding you that his timing is perfect. What he is preparing to reveal cannot be rushed or forced, because it is not just for your comfort. It is for your transformation. The silence, though painful, is an intentional space for growth. And when the revelation finally comes, it will not only answer your prayers, but also elevate your vision, deepen your faith, and enlarge your understanding of who God is and what he is doing in your life. So don't mistake God's silence for absence. Don't confuse his quiet for rejection. The silence of heaven is the classroom of faith, the training ground of trust, and the proving place of endurance. When you don't hear his voice, trust his hand. When you don't see his movement, trust his plan. Because even in silence, God is speaking. Even in stillness, God is moving. And even when you don't feel him, he is closer than you think, working all things together for your good.